The first fundamental requirement of a birdwatcher is patience. If you are not prepared to invest a lot of time in this activity, you won't be around when birds are present. The best time to look for birds is from dawn to early morning or late afternoon till dusk. Try to select a sunny location, especially in the winter time. If you live some distance away, it may in fact require you to camp on site overnight or travel to the site before dawn. That is not to say you won't see birds later, only that they might be less active or conspicuous, resting up quietly somewhere after breakfast. There are some bird watching rules. Responsible bird observers practice minimum impact bird watching. That means to study nature with the minimum amount of disturbance caused and certainly no damage done. Apart from the obvious, not interfering with the everyday life of birds and animals in general, minimum impact has the additional advantage of leading to the most rewarding experiences, with birds being seen behaving in a natural way. One can then also film or photograph birds engaging in their natural activities. If in doubt about how to behave in nature, try to tag along with an experienced birdwatcher first. That way you can learn most of the basic techniques in a reasonably short time, and you get to ask questions. We learn fastest in one-on-one training. Groups tend to create too much of a disturbance for individuals to learn the more subtle requirements of birdwatching. Be quiet, keep your eyes peeled and your lips sealed. Trivial. This is the most frequently broken basic rule of birdwatching. Move quietly and slowly. Avoid a direct approach to a bird. A sideways approach appears less threatening to birds. Use natural cover to move through the landscape. However, wildlife are awake up to furtive behaviour, and if they detect you, they are more alert than if you were in the open, seemingly ignoring them. So avoid approaching them like a predator. The chances are you won't be good enough. Be there first. In most cases, it is just no use trying to approach a bird. Apart from the disturbance you will create, the chances of a good view or photo are small. A bird's survival depends on its alertness. Our inability to move with the stealth of a cat does not really help either. The much more promising tactical approach is to be in a certain area first, remain quiet and inconspicuous, and wait for the birds to move in. Dress code can be important. Although we do not need to wear camouflage colours, it does not help to show up wearing a bright coloured outfit. Inconspicuous colours blending into the landscape are a plus. White clothing is too conspicuous. Even shield your spectacles with a cap or a hat. Staring at a bird is threatening, like a predator. Also, shielding your eyes helps against the sun's glare. Although screening or camouflage in the form of a tent or a hide may help to reduce your impact on wildlife during a visit, care must be taken in the process of setting up and dismantling a hide. If this is not performed in a non-obtrusive way, your good intentions may in fact lead to an increase rather than a decrease in disturbance. It is often just as good to use natural features. Hides are really only useful in a few circumstances. Stand or sit with your back to a tree or a boulder. It helps to break up your outline and makes any movement less conspicuous. Just make sure you have a clear line of sight towards the area you want to observe. Let things settle down. Whichever way you use to enter a habitat, you have to give the environment time to settle down again before observations can be made of animals behaving naturally. Depending on the severity of the disturbance caused by your approach, and depending on a bird's shyness, this may take some time. When arriving in a habitat, we can sometimes immediately see the effects of our arrival, but perhaps less obvious to the birdwatcher is his departure, which will cause similar ripples, which means we should retreat with just as much care as for our arrival. Choose the right time of day. Depending on what we want to see, the time of day can play a crucial role. In general, birds are most active around dawn and early morning, and also at dusk. After a long night, birds will try to be the first to exploit food resources before the competition moves in. But even that must wait until the territory is reclaimed. This is why we hear most contact calls first thing in the morning. As we gain experience in birdwatching, we learn to quickly discern certain characteristics in birds. Even though we may not know immediately which species we have just briefly seen, picking up these characteristics in an instant, often subconsciously, is called acquiring a bird's jizz, which means gaining a general impression of size and shape. It also includes characteristic movements, flight pattern, for example, wing beat frequency and rhythm. There are, of course, a number of other relevant issues that we become aware of in time. By attaching yourself to a guide or attending a course, you can pick them up quicker. I want to offer some comments about bird calls. All too often, our only clue to the presence of some birds is their call. Thick scrub or the leaves of the high tree canopy can make it impossible to visually identify the caller. It is not surprising then that new observers are prompted to learn to recognize birds by their call. But there are severe limits to this strategy. On so many field trips, 50% or more species cannot be visually confirmed. Reliance on bird calls for identification in many cases is quite misleading. See how many of these bird calls you can identify. Birds have extensive repertoires. Consider the fact that birds often have special calls in the following situations. There is the subdued broadcast, which says, "Warning, a stranger present." It is often recognized and understood by unrelated species. Another call is an alarm, "Danger present." This too is often recognized and understood by other species, even mammals. No trespassing, this is my territory or our territory. It is always directed at the same species and much exercised in the breeding season. There are courtship calls and invitations, male to female. He is advertising good territory or himself as a good breeding prospect. And parents will often say to young, "Look here, food is available." Just about everyone will have seen this in a domestic poultry flock foraging in the garden. In the forest, a male ranging away from the nest site will call to the female, "I am foraging over here," and the nesting female responds, "All is well here at home." I witnessed this many times in orioles. Their calls are quite different in this example, but male calls are often quite different to female calls. There is foraging chatter between members of a small party or a bonded pair. For example, whipbirds, particularly in thick undergrowth, where they can't see one another. There is social chatter between members of a flock at leisure, of cockatoos and parrots and swans. There is travelling chatter between members of a flock on the wing, cockatoos and brolgers. Also, there may be geographic variations, and sometimes widely separated populations have markedly different language. Recent research has identified changes in the pitch of bird calls. Birds living in suburbia are changing their calls, presumably to compensate for the ambient sound levels and pitch, which are quite different in suburbia to what they are in the bush. If birds confined themselves to their own language, the issue would be difficult enough. But many birds mimic the language of other species, leaving aside warning, alarm and danger calls, which may be recognised for what they represent. Whether birds understand other foreign language elements is quite another matter. In his book Bird Wonders of Australia, first written in 1934, Alex Chisholm reported that the list of Australian birds known to use vocal mimicry, either consistently or casually, includes no fewer than 52 species. He tells the story of a forest surveyor who was camped out at Hell's Gates in Victoria, who was annoyed to see through his theodolite his men doing certain operations without the usual instructions. The fact became revealed subsequently that they had obeyed instructions from a lyrebird in an adjacent gully, which faultlessly imitated the surveyor's shrill staccato code of signals. He related a number of similar extraordinary stories, and they weren't about lyrebirds. Otherwise, perhaps we might not be so surprised, since we have come to accept the lyrebird's skill, which is universally recognised. So aspiring to learn to recognise the song of birds is a laudable ambition, but caution must be exercised before assuming the presence of a particular species without actually seeing it.